I still remember the echo of that morning, the clink of champagne glasses, my mother's laughter, and my grandfather's quiet voice asking, "Is this really what family looks like now?" An hour later, they left him at the airport alone. No ticket, no driver, just a suitcase and a lifetime of generosity, thrown away like luggage nobody wanted. My parents thought they'd finally won. They tricked my billionaire grandfather into signing over his mansion, his art, his legacy. I was supposed to celebrate with them, but when my phone buzzed, 29 missed calls from Grandpa. Something inside me broke. Because I knew him better than anyone. He never begged, never called twice. So, if he called 29 times, something wasn't right. That day, I made a promise to find out what really happened. And I had no idea that the deed they made him sign would destroy everything they thought they owned. The house smelled like money that night, not the new kind, but the old kind that seeps into marble floors and crystal chandeliers. My mother's laughter bounced off the high ceilings as she poured another glass of champagne. 2 new beginnings, she said, clinking glasses with my father. 2. Finally having what's rightfully ours. They stood at the balcony of my grandfather's mansion, their new mansion, overlooking the gardens that once belonged to him. The pool lights shimmered against the night sky, reflecting the smug glow on their faces. "Can you believe he finally signed the papers?" Dad said, swirling his drink. Mom's lipstick curved into a perfect victorious smile. "After all those years of him donating everything to charity. Oh, I believe it." The old man finally understood who really deserves this life. I sat quietly at the dining table, pushing my untouched food around the plate. The chandelier above me threw diamond patterns across the silverware, just like the ones Grandpa used to polish himself when he hosted dinners. But that warmth, that laughter, it was gone, replaced by this hollow imitation of joy. "Claire, sweetheart," Mom called out, her tone sugary and sharp. "Aren't you going to toast your grandfather for his generosity?" I met her eyes. "Did he really give it to you, or did you just take it?" The air froze. Dad chuckled to smooth it over, but his jaw tightened. "Your grandfather wanted this," he said. He said it himself. He's tired. Wants a simpler life. "Then why didn't he come to the celebration?" I asked. Mom rolled her eyes. "Because he doesn't like parties anymore. You know how old people are. Always tired, always dramatic." But I remembered the look in Grandpa's eyes when he left that morning. The way he lingered near the doorway, his hand resting on the carved banister like he was saying goodbye to something more than a house. He'd built this place brick by brick after the war, turning a small inheritance into a global empire. Every inch of this estate was a story. The library where he'd read to me as a child. The fountain where Grandma's ashes were scattered. The piano room that still carried faint traces of her perfume. And now my parents were celebrating their victory over him, playing music, laughing, dancing across the marble floors as if erasing him from memory. Dad raised his glass again. "To the future, my love. No more begging for his approval." Mom leaned against him, whispering, "And no more pretending we care about his legacy." I felt my stomach twist. These were my parents, the people who taught me right from wrong, who told me family mattered more than anything. And yet, here they were, toasting to betrayal. I excused myself, stepping out onto the balcony for air. The garden lights flickered below, illuminating the old stone bench where Grandpa used to sit with me, feeding the koi in the pond. He always said, "Kindness builds empires longer than greed ever will." That night, as fireworks burst above the city skyline, I realized something awful. They hadn't just stolen a house. They'd stolen his dignity. And deep down, I knew men like Oliver Grant don't lose quietly. When I went to bed, I found an envelope on my nightstand. My name written in his neat, slanted handwriting. Inside, one line read, "Keep your heart clean, Claire. When the storm hits, you'll need it." I didn't understand it then, But by morning that storm had already begun to move. The next morning, sunlight poured through the massive windows like a spotlight on guilt. My parents were already dressed, Dad in a navy blazer, Mom in pearls and a satisfied smirk. The breakfast table was set for 3, but only 2 plates were being used. "Where's Grandpa?" I asked. Mom buttered her toast delicately. "Packing. We're driving him to the airport." "Ever?" I frowned. "Why?" "He needs a break," Dad said, sipping his coffee. "Some time away to rest. He's been stressed lately. Poor man." Something in his tone felt rehearsed. I looked toward the hallway. Through the half-open door, I saw Grandpa sitting in the foyer, suitcase beside him, hands clasped over his cane. His clothes were simple grey slacks, a white shirt, his favorite worn leather shoes, the same pair he'd worn for years. He looked up when he saw me. "Morning, Claire. Are you really going somewhere?" I asked quietly. His eyes softened. "Just for a bit, my dear. Your parents insist I need a vacation." "But you hate traveling." He smiled faintly. "Yes, but sometimes you let people think they're in control until they're not." Before I could respond, Dad's voice cut through the hall. "Let's get moving. Don't want you missing your flight, old man." The drive was long and silent. The closer we got to the airport, the heavier the air felt. Dad hummed along to the radio, pretending nothing was wrong. Mom scrolled through her phone, checking emails about decorators and contractors for their mansion. I sat in the back seat beside Grandpa, watching the lines of the highway blur past. His gaze was steady, his posture calm, but his fingers tapped lightly against his cane. 1, 2, 3. The same rhythm he used when he was thinking through something serious. "You okay, Grandpa?" I asked softly. He nodded once. "Claire, do you remember what I told you when your grandmother died about family?" He smiled. "Yes. That blood doesn't make people loyal choices." Mom turned slightly in her seat. "What are you two whispering about back there?" "Memories," Grandpa said smoothly. "One's worth keeping. Eston." We pulled up to the terminal a few minutes later. Dad popped the trunk, tossed Grandpa's suitcase onto the curb. "Here we are. You're all set. Do I have a ticket?" Grandpa asked. Mom avoided his eyes. "It's digital. You'll find it when you check in." He stood there, hands resting on the handle of his suitcase. "And where am I going exactly?" Dad shrugged. "You'll figure it out. You always do." It was supposed to sound light, maybe even affectionate. But it wasn't. It was cruel. "Claire," Mom said sharply, "say goodbye to your grandfather." I hesitated. My throat felt dry. "You'll call me when you land." He smiled gently. "Of course. Don't worry, sweetheart. I always call." They got back in the car before he even entered the terminal. I turned to look through the rear window. Grandpa was standing there, small and dignified against the massive glass facade of the airport, his coat fluttering in the wind. "Don't look back," Mom said, gripping the wheel. "He'll be fine." But I did look back. And what I saw still haunts me. Grandpa slowly sitting on a bench by gate 14, pulling out his phone, staring at it for a long time before dialing. An hour later, when my parents were laughing over lunch in the city, my phone buzzed in my pocket. 29 missed calls from Grandpa. That was the moment I knew something terrible had just begun. That night, the house was quieter than it had ever been. No jazz from Grandpa's old gramophone. No low hum of his voice reading the paper by the fireplace. Just the sound of rain tapping against the glass, like the house itself knew something had gone terribly wrong. Mom and Dad sat in the living room drinking. Again. The deed folder lay open on the coffee table between them. The thick legal pages spread out like trophies. 2. New beginnings, Dad said, raising his glass. Mom laughed. To finally being free of his lectures and charity nonsense. I stood in the doorway watching them celebrate what felt like a funeral. Did he call you? I asked. Mom waved me off. Oh, please. He'll be fine. He's probably already on some flight to Europe. Dad chuckled. Or maybe he's halfway to the Bahamas. Either way, he's out of our hair. Then Mom's phone lit up on the table. Grandpa Oliver. 1 ring. 2 rings. It stopped. Then another. And another. By the 10th call, the air in the room had changed. Dad frowned. That's weird. Mom grabbed the phone, silencing it. He's probably confused again. Don't answer. But then my phone buzzed in my pocket. When I looked down, I froze. 29 missed calls. All from Grandpa. Why would he call me? I whispered. Why not you? Dad looked annoyed. Because he knows you'll pick up. You always were his favorite. Mom's lips tightened. He's just being dramatic. Ignore it. I walked out before she could stop me. My hands were trembling as I dialed his number. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I called. Again. Nothing. Finally, I opened the family group chat. The last message. There was from him sent an hour after they'd left him at the airport. I hope you take care of my house the way I took care of you. Attached was a photo of a document. Edges slightly crumpled. It looked like the deed, but the signature line was blurred by the reflection of his gold pen. Dad looked over my shoulder. That's just a photo. He's bluffing. Mom poured herself another drink. He's probably angry we didn't throw him a farewell party. Let him cool off. But I couldn't shake the unease crawling up my spine. Grandpa didn't bluff. He planned. He was the kind of man who could turn silence into strategy. The kind who never raised his voice yet made people listen. I stared at that message again, the words looping in my mind like a warning. Take care of my house the way I took care of you. What does that mean? I whispered. Dad muttered. It means we own it now. That's what. But deep down, I could tell even. He wasn't sure anymore. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills, shaking the window frames. The chandelier flickered. Just once, and for a heartbeat, I could almost hear Grandpa's voice echo through the halls. Nothing taken by greed lasts long. Claire. I tried calling again, but this time, his number was disconnected. That was when Mom's laughter stopped. Her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. 1 sentence, no name. Enjoy the house while it's still yours. She dropped the phone. For the first time since the celebration, my parents looked afraid. And I knew whatever they had started at that airport, Grandpa had just started finishing. The next morning, sunlight slanted through the curtains like a spotlight on guilt. The laughter from last night was gone. The air in the mansion felt heavy, uneasy. I woke to the sound of a car engine outside. Low, steady, official. When I stepped into the foyer, a sleek black SUV was parked in the driveway. A man in a dark suit stood by the fountain holding a leather briefcase and an envelope. His shoes gleamed like mirrors. Dad appeared behind me, straightening his robe. Can I help you? The man smiled politely. Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Grant. Mom joined him, voice bright but nervous. Yes. Is this about the title transfer? In a way, he replied, handing her the envelope. You might want to read this carefully. Dad tore it open, eyes scanning the first page. His expression shifted from smug to pale in seconds. What is this? He demanded. The man adjusted his tie. Confirmation of property reallocation, sir. Mom blinked. Reallocation. We already transferred ownership last week. Yes, the man said calmly. And your father, Mr. Oliver Grant, filed a corrective deed an hour later. Corrective what? Dad snapped. It voids all unauthorized transfers and transfers full ownership of the estate assets and trust holdings to the Grant Family Foundation. Effective immediately, The words hit like gunfire. Mom's champagne. Confidence vanished. That can't be right, she whispered. He signed the deed. I watched him. The man nodded. Yes, He signed a deed, but not the one you think. He handed her a photocopy. I leaned closer. Grandpa's signature was there, but the header read, Declaration of Charitable Trust. Grant Estate. It wasn't a gift. It was a trap. Dad's voice rose. You're saying we don't own anything? The man didn't flinch. That's correct. Everything now belongs to the foundation, including the property you're standing in. Mom's face went crimson. No, he can't do that. He can, the man said simply. And he did. Before you dropped him off. At the airport. I could feel the blood drain from my face. So he knew. The man's expression softened as he looked at me. He knew everything, Miss Grant. Your grandfather isn't as forgetful as people think. Dad tried to laugh it off, voice shaking. This is ridiculous. Well, sue him. You can try, the man said, adjusting his briefcase. But he left a notarized statement with 3 witnesses, video evidence, and a legal clause preventing reversal. You might want to contact your attorney if you still have one. Mom's hands were trembling as she dropped the papers onto the floor. Why would he do this to us? The man's gaze flickered to me. He wrote one note before filing the documents. Said to make sure Miss Claire received it. He handed me a folded letter sealed with a red wax. Gee, I broke the seal. The handwriting was unmistakable. My dearest Claire, some lessons can't be taught through kindness. Your parents wanted my house. So, I gave them walls, empty ones. But I left you something else. Truth. When they realize what they've lost. Come find me. I'll be waiting where honesty still matters. I looked up, heart pounding. Where is he now? The man smiled faintly. You'll find him soon enough. Then he turned and left, the black SUV gliding away down the drive, leaving silence in its wake. Dad crumpled the paper in his fist, eyes wild. His playing games. Mom's voice cracked. We're ruined. And for the first time, I realized Grandpa hadn't been abandoned. He'd been setting the board. By afternoon, the mansion didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage, set for someone else's story. And my parents had just realized they were the villains. Mom paced the marble floor, clutching her phone like a lifeline. He can't just take it all back. It's ours. He signed it. Dad's voice boomed from the study. Then why is every lawyer I call refusing to take our case? Because they're scared of him. She snapped. Oliver Grant still owns half this city. I stood quietly in the doorway, the letter still in my hand. Grandpa's words echoed in my mind. I left you something else. Truth. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Maybe he didn't trick you, I said softly. Maybe he protected himself. Dad turned on me, eyes burning. You think this is funny, Claire? He made fools out of us. He didn't have to. I said, you did that on your own. The room went cold. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. You don't know what that man's capable of. He's manipulative, controlling, disciplined. I cut in. Not controlling. You used him and now you're just mad he played the game better. Mom's voice trembled. Enough, Claire. You don't understand. We earned this life. By lying, I asked, by abandoning him at the airport. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Address: Grant Industries Tower. 52nd floor. Message: I'm waiting. My heart stopped. It's him. Without another word, I grabbed my keys. Claire. Mom called after me. You're not going anywhere, but I was already out the door. Downtown. The Grant Industries building rose like a monument of glass and steel, the empire Grandpa had built from nothing. The receptionist looked up as I entered. "Miss Grant," she said, smiling faintly. "He's expecting you." I rode the elevator in silence, the floor numbers blinking one by one until the doors slid open to reveal a private office with floor-to-ceiling windows. Grandpa stood by the glass, his reflection framed by the city skyline. He turned slowly, that familiar calm in his eyes. "I was wondering when you'd come." I froze. "You knew they'd do it, didn't you?" He nodded once. "Your parents forgot something important. You can't steal from someone who's already given up ownership." I frowned. "You mean the deed?" He smiled faintly, walking toward his desk. "The deed they made me sign transferred everything to the Grant Foundation. My foundation. I simply let them believe it was theirs." He handed me 2 folders, one labeled Trust Reallocation, the other Personal Will. "They thought they'd taken my home," he continued. "But all they did was expose who they really are." I opened the first folder. Inside were bank statements, property titles, and letters of transfer. All legally notarized, every asset was safe, every signature verified. "But why let them think they won?" I asked. He looked out the window. Again. "Because people reveal themselves when they think the battle is over." He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Claire, I didn't do this to destroy them. I did it to free you." "Free me from what?" "From becoming like them." His eyes softened. "You have a good heart, my dear. Don't trade it for greed. Let them learn what loss feels like so they remember what love once meant." And in that moment, I understood. Grandpa hadn't lost control. He'd been in command the entire time. When I returned home that evening, the air in the mansion was thick, not with pride anymore, but panic. The smell of champagne had been replaced by sweat and fear. My parents were tearing through drawers and boxes, searching for papers. That no longer mattered. Mom's voice cracked. "He can't just erase us like this. We're family." Dad slammed a drawer shut. "We are the family. He's the one who lost it." I stepped into the doorway. "No," I said quietly. "He didn't lose anything. You did." Mom turned, eyes wild. "You've been talking to him, haven't you?" "Yes," I said. "And you should, too. He's waiting for you." They froze. "Waiting?" Dad repeated. "Where?" "At the mansion gates," I said. "He wants to see you for a moment." Neither of them moved. Then Dad straightened his jacket. "Fine, let's end this." We drove in silence. The long driveway, once a symbol of pride, now felt like a path to judgment. The mansion loomed ahead, lights glowing through the rain. 2 security guards stood by the gates, unmoving. When we stepped out of the car, a black sedan pulled up behind us. The door opened. Grandpa stepped out slowly, leaning on his cane, dressed in his usual tweed coat, the same one Mom had mocked so many times. His presence filled the space like gravity. "Oliver," Mom began, voice trembling. "We can explain," he raised a hand. "Don't." The wind carried his words like quiet thunder. "You already explained everything when you drove away from the airport." Dad's voice rose. "You tricked us. You made us think." "I made you." "Nothing." Grandpa interrupted. "You did that yourself." For a second, nobody moved. Rain pattered softly on the marble steps. Mom's voice broke. "We just wanted security. You always kept us waiting for approval, for inheritance." Grandpa's expression hardened. "And when you finally had enough, you traded love for greed." She started crying. "We thought you'd forgive us." "I did," he said simply. "That's why I didn't call the police." Dad's head snapped up. "Police? Fraud, forgery, coercion. Those are crimes, Harold." His tone stayed calm. "But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for truth." He turned toward me. "Claire, the documents." I handed him the folder he'd given me earlier. He opened it and read aloud, each word slow. and deliberate. By the authority of the Grant Family Foundation, all assets formerly held in the name of Oliver Grant shall remain property of the Foundation, and any individuals found guilty of exploitation or coercion shall be permanently removed from the inheritance registry. Mom gasped. Removed. He nodded. You will live your lives, but not on my name, not on my work, and not on the back of my trust. Dad clenched his fists. You can't do this. Grandpa met his glare. I already did. The guard stepped forward, handing Dad a sealed envelope. Inside was a relocation agreement, an apartment under their names, modest, but livable. You won't be homeless, Grandpa said. Quietly. Just humbled. Mom sobbed into her hands. Dad, please. We made a mistake. He looked at her for a long time. His voice softened, but his words cut deeper than anger. You made a choice. Then he turned to me. Claire, come home. I hesitated. Here. He smiled. Faintly. Yes. Someone has to fill this house with decency again. As I followed him toward the car, I looked back once. My parents stood in the rain, two silhouettes beneath the grand iron gates. They no longer owned. They wanted a kingdom, but they forgot who the king really was. The next morning, the headlines broke before breakfast. Billionaire Oliver Grant reclaims estate after family betrayal. Every major outlet ran the story, accompanied by photos of my parents standing outside the gates in the rain, drenched, humiliated, exposed. Mom locked herself in her room, the curtains drawn tight. Dad spent the day on the phone trying to do damage control, but every call ended the same. A quiet click, a rejection, a door closing. No lawyer wanted to be part of this scandal. Meanwhile, Grandpa moved quietly, efficiently. He didn't gloat. He didn't seek vengeance. He simply restored what was his. The Grant Foundation resumed control of the estate. The staff returned and the media waited at the front gates for his statement. That afternoon, Grandpa called me into his study. The same office that had once belonged to my father, now emptied of everything but truth. Claire, he said, looking up from his papers. It's time for what? He handed me a press badge and a small speech written in his own handwriting. To end this properly, my stomach twisted. You're going to speak to the press. He nodded. They deserve clarity, and your parents deserve the truth. Publicly. The following day, the courtyard was crowded with reporters, camera crews, and curious onlookers. The marble steps shimmered under the afternoon sunday. Grandpa stepped forward in his simple grey suit. No jewelry, no guards, no pretense, just presence. He began slowly, voice steady. Family should protect legacy, not plunder it. I gave my children everything, not because they earned it, but because I believed in them, and in return, they tried to take what wasn't theirs to begin with. Flashbulbs exploded, reporters murmured. But his tone never wavered. When I was left at that airport, I didn't feel anger. I felt disappointment because betrayal doesn't always come from strangers sometimes. It wears your last name. He paused, looking toward the crowd. My parents stood at the back, pale and trembling, flanked by cameras. But today isn't about punishment. It's about protection. The Grant Foundation will continue serving communities, funding schools, hospitals, and shelters, the same causes that built our name. My legacy doesn't belong to bloodlines. It belongs to decency. The crowd erupted in applause. The sound was thunderous, echoing off the estate walls. Then, unexpectedly, Grandpa turned to me. Claire, he said, beckoning me forward. My legs shook as I joined him at the podium. This is my granddaughter, he announced. The only person who answered when I called, not because of money, but because she still cared. And for my throat tightened. Cameras clicked wildly, but I could barely breathe. She will help me lead the foundation moving forward, he continued. Because integrity must live through those who choose it. I turned to him, whispering, "You don't have to do this." He smiled gently. "Yes, I do. Every empire needs a heart, Claire. And yours beats where theirs stopped." He handed me a small velvet box, the same one he'd once given my grandmother when he proposed. Inside wasn't jewelry. It was a single brass key. "The key to the foundation," he said softly. "And to my trust, the press." Gasped. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Dad took a step forward, shouting, "You can Titi just erase us." Grandpa didn't even raise his voice. "You erased yourselves the day you chose greed over love." Then he turned back to the crowd. "Let this be a reminder," he said. "Wealth means nothing if you lose your soul, keeping it." Applause broke out again, louder this time. Resonant and righteous. Reporters swarmed to capture every frame. I looked toward my parents. Mom's mascara ran down her cheeks, her lips trembling with regret. Dad just stood there hollow-eyed, realizing the fight was over. When Grandpa stepped away from the podium, he took my hand. "Come," he said. "It's time to go home." As we walked back inside, I felt hundreds of eyes on us. But for once, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't ashamed. Behind us, the headlines were already being written. The Grant legacy restored. But what stayed with me wasn't the applause or the cameras or even the vindication. It was the quiet moment when Grandpa leaned toward me and whispered, "You see, Claire, they left me at the airport thinking they'd taken everything. But sometimes losing you is the best way for people to find themselves again." And for the first time, I understood what he meant. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward without carrying their sins with me. Weeks passed. The mansion was quieter now, not hollow like before, but peaceful. For the first time in years, the halls echoed with real laughter again. Grandpa's old gramophone played softly in the evenings, and the smell of fresh roses filled the courtyard. Mom and Dad had moved out of the city into a small apartment. The foundation arranged for them, not as punishment, but as a chance to start over. Grandpa refused to press charges. "They've already been sentenced," he said quietly one morning, as we watched the sunrise. "They just don't know it yet." He meant the weight of shame of knowing that every headline, every whisper would remind them of what they'd done. But he also meant something deeper. The emptiness that comes when you lose the one thing money can't buy: respect. I visited them once. The apartment was small, cluttered, stripped of luxury. Dad was fixing a broken lamp. Mom sat by the window folding laundry in silence. When she saw me, her eyes softened, but her voice trembled. "Claire, how is he?" "He's fine," I said. "He doesn't hate you. He just expected more." She nodded slowly, tears glinting in her eyes. "We expected more, too, from ourselves." There was nothing else to say. I left them with a quiet goodbye and a small envelope, an invitation to the next foundation and gala. I didn't know if they'd come. Back at the mansion, life settled into something new. Grandpa returned to his work with renewed focus, but something had changed. He smiled more. He took longer walks, and sometimes he'd stop by my office and watch me go through documents, pretending not to read over my shoulder. "You're meticulous," he said. One afternoon, I grinned. "I learned from the best," he chuckled softly. "Just don't let precision become pride. That's how it starts." We spent long evenings on the balcony talking about everything: my future, the foundation, the kind of person I wanted to be. He never lectured. He simply shared pieces of himself, like puzzle fragments that eventually formed the man I was just beginning to understand. One night, as the city lights glittered below, he handed me a folder. "What's this?" I asked. "Your first project," he said. "A housing initiative for veterans. It's time you built something of your own." I opened the folder, scanning the plans, the numbers, the names. This is huge, he smiled. So was my first idea. Every empire starts small until it's built on purpose. I looked at him, the man who'd lost everything once and built it back with integrity. The man my parents had underestimated and I'd nearly lost, too. Grandpa, I said. Quietly. Were you ever angry? He sipped his tea, thinking for a while. Yes. But then I realized anger doesn't build anything. It only burns what's left. So I chose to build again without them if I had to. That night, I finally understood the letter he'd written me. The one that said, "Keep your heart clean, Claire. When the storm hits, you'll need it." He wasn't warning me about betrayal. He was preparing me for forgiveness. Months later at the Foundation's gala, I spotted two familiar faces at the back of the hall. My parents dressed simply, hands intertwined, eyes lowered. Grandpa noticed, too. He leaned over and whispered, "Let them in." "Are you sure?" I asked. He nodded. Every story needs an ending, even theirs. That night, they didn't ask for money or attention. They just said thank you. When the music began and the lights dimmed, Grandpa looked at me and said, "You see, Claire, legacies aren't written in wealth. They're written in the choices people remember." And as I watched my parents standing quietly among the crowd, I realized what he meant. The true inheritance wasn't the mansion or the title or even the fortune. It was the chance to live a life that honored his values, not their mistakes. Because in the end, Grandpa hadn't just reclaimed his house, he'd reclaimed his family's soul.